Right now, Crimson Desert is finally starting to look like the sort of game we've been waiting for. Not just another open world with cool set pieces, but something genuinely layered, alive, and built to be a long-term experience. It's pretty much things you should know about the game before jumping in, like how many hours do this game got, what to do in it, and what's coming after launch. From mechanics deep dives to interviews about world scale, post-launch support, and what players will actually do once they finish the story. Paint a picture of a game that is, in Abyss's words, truly massive in scope, and potentially massive in ambition. Drop a like on the video right now if you'd like exclusive gameplay on Crimson Desert in the coming weeks, and let's start right away. Few months and years ago, it was easy to watch one of the game's trailer and think that it looked pretty and fun. But now we're hearing straight from the developers that the main campaign, the story you play through with Cliff, is deliberately only a small percentage of the overall experience. That alone says a lot about how this world is structured. Will Powers, Per Abyss's PR director, refused to attach a specific hour count to the campaign, not because they're hiding something, but because open-world games live and breathe differently for every player. Some rush the story, others spend dozens of hours in side quests, crafting, exploration, and just wandering the world. In his own words, he spent about 50 hours focused just on side content, mining, upgrading weapons, exploring deep into systems and mechanics, without even touching optional activities like fishing, and that's before you hit the real breadth of what Crimson Desert has to offer. The developers have designed the experience to have a constant sense of progression and reward, no matter how much time you've got to play, and that design philosophy shows in how everything is built to feel meaningful. What's even more impressive is how this scale is backed by actual world size. We now know Pywell, the continent you'll be exploring, is reportedly twice the size of Skyrim, and larger than the world of Red Dead Redemption 2. That comparison alone tells you that this isn't a world that's meant to be traversed quickly or casually. It's a world that's meant to be lived in, revisited, discovered, and explored again and again. And the environment isn't empty either. Rivers gleam with reflective water. Streets are filled with people living their daily lives. And magic isn't just visual flair, it interacts with the world. Water conducts lightning and becomes ice under freezing spells. They're systems that hint at the possibility of deeper emergent gameplay later on, even if early previews caution that Pearl Abyss hasn't fully demonstrated how all of that will be challenged in mission design. Speaking of systems, the elemental interactions are just one part of a much broader set of mechanics. Combat is flexible and reactive. Progression isn't just about stats, it's about how you build your character to engage with Pywell's threats. Factions hold deep quest lines with narratives you can skip or dive into. Fortresses hold strategic significance, and liberating them isn't just a cutscene. It shifts the world around you, makes regions safer to travel, and opens up new merchant routes, resource access, and narrative pathways. But even as the depth of mechanics comes into focus, the real wildcard has always been how Crimson Desert will feel as a cohesive experience. Early impressions from hands-on time have been enthusiastic about individual systems, the combat, the world reactions, the tense environments, but cautious about whether all of it actually ties together into a satisfying whole. Some previews mentioned that while they enjoyed dynamic systems and flexible action, they still didn't feel like they'd glimpsed the full picture of what Crimson Desert's big narrative is going to be. They spoke about beautiful landscapes, reactive systems, and impressive technical execution, but also about not yet having met characters that truly stuck with them or narrative moments that resonated on the level of, say, The Witcher 3 or Red Dead Redemption 2. Even so, one of the most intriguing new details is how much Pearl Abyss is willing to commit to post-launch support. In a recent interview, the developers made it clear that Crimson Desert isn't intended to be a static retail release that gets forgotten once the credits roll. The world, systems, and story are deliberately designed in such a way that additional content can be built on top of them if the player appetite is there. That doesn't necessarily mean expansions the size of full retail games, but it does suggest more regions, deeper faction development, and additional encounters or systems arriving over time. This kind of ongoing support could be huge because it directly alleviates one of the biggest concerns about massive open worlds, that they burn themselves out after the first 30 or 40 hours only to leave players feeling like there's nothing left to do. If Crimson Desert is built to grow, not just in terms of content, but in terms of narrative, systems, and player choice, it could have a longevity that far outstrips even its enormous map size. And talking about longevity leads straight into how the game structures playtime. The developers have deliberately avoided giving an average playtime for the main campaign because they don't want to pigeonhole players, but the consensus based on side content alone suggests that players could easily be logging well over 100 hours if they engage with everything: crafting, fortress liberation, faction quests, emergent encounters, dynamic events in the world. There's enough there that skipping any of it would be missing out on a major part of the experience. The addition of 2 new playable protagonists halfway through Cliff's story further complicates and enriches that landscape. One character leans into fast dodging, elemental magic, and firearm synergy, offering a more roguish, agile playstyle that contrasts with Cliff's grounded warrior identity. The other is a hulking brute with a machine gun integrated directly into his arm and melee power that rewards aggressive breaks in formation. The fact that these characters aren't just cosmetic skins but fully realized combat archetypes tells you that Pearl Abyss isn't just layering options on top of the same systems. They're deliberately diversifying how you experience the world. Of course, that level of breadth brings its own risks: building systems that interact meaningfully, narratives that resonate emotionally, and worlds that feel both lived in and purposeful is incredibly difficult. Some previews note that many early missions have been siege-focused and relatively thin on narrative context so far, with only occasional detours into more eccentric side content. That's not necessarily bad. Big worlds often hold their narrative punches until you've settled into them, but it does highlight the danger of an experience where systems overwhelm story or narrative cohesion gets lost beneath mechanics. Still, the potential here is real. Everything in Crimson Desert feels like a deliberate choice, from open-ended combat systems to emergent exploration, from dynamic world reactions to the ability to shape your pace and priorities. The developers have prioritized agency over prescription, which is always risky but always more rewarding when it works. So why should players be cautiously excited? Because Crimson Desert isn't just big for the sake of being big, it's expensive in a way that feels like it could support genuinely diverse playstyles and long-term engagement. It's reactive in its systems, not just its visuals. It's built to be more than a single story you beat once and forget. That combination, scope, depth, flexibility, and a living world that doesn't stop moving when you log off, is exactly what makes games like Red Dead, The Witcher, and other classics feel special. Crimson Desert hasn't shown its full hand yet, and that's intentional, but what it has shown suggests it's aiming for something much larger than the sum of its parts. It's shaping up to be one of the most talked about games of 2026, and not just because of how big it is, but because of what it's trying to do with all that space.